All right, hello class. So I'm posting this video today because the last one that I posted that kind of provided a walkthrough of the project clearly didn't have audio, so I want to fix that here. What's nice is by doing it in this video, I have a little bit more time to work through this and to kind of answer some of the questions that I'm already starting to receive about this project. So let's take a look to get started at the project overview. And so again, some of you still kind of express some confusion or some anxiety about the project. What I want to stress is that all we're doing here is we're collecting the six-ish sources that you've gathered, through your research. Actually, let me back up. Your goal here is to take the topic that interested you in your first or second projects. When you're asking those research questions, you started to ask questions about things that you cared about in your community. And so whether it was, I'm interested in how, technology is improving the ability for surgeons to perform their duties or whatever it might be. You were asking those questions because you were curious about this topic in your community. So what you've been doing so far, and what you should continue to do, is to then go into the library resources, and use those to look up and find information about that topic, about, for example, technology and medicine. And the goal here is that you're going into the library with questions, and that some of the sources that you find might start to answer those questions. And so your goal for the literature review is to just help inform your reader what you found in relationship to that topic. And so what you're doing is you're taking the six sources that you found that are related to the topic that you're interested in, and you are going to summarize and synthesize them. So it's a two-step process, and we'll take a look at the example here in a second. But essentially what this means is that you'll go through and you'll provide the main argument or arguments, if there are more than one, of each text. And then you'll talk about how it relates to similar texts that you found in your research, and that's where that synthesis comes in. So that by the end of the literature review, what you'll have is you'll have a really good collection of sources that are all explained in such a way so that the reader can understand, and so that you can understand how experts in the field are coming at this topic that you're interested in. So whether it's technology and medicine, or gender and nursing, or efficiency in shipping and packaging, whatever it is, whatever topic you're interested in. By the end of the literature review, you will have a collection of sources, and you've demonstrated your knowledge of them by being able to summarize them and synthesize them. And so that you can kind of point to that and say, like, look, here is the current conversation about this topic. And the reason that we're doing this will become much more clear when we get to our next project, because at that point is where you are going to enter in with your own ideas and start to offer up your approach to this same topic. But for now, let's just focus in on the literature review. So we'll go to our week 7. We'll go all the way down here, and we'll see the sample of the literature review. So let's go ahead and pull this up. And now the work that you're doing this week with the annotated bibliography and with the visual mapping and things like that, as I said in this week's video, those are all really good kind of first steps forward into tackling this project. Because what you're going to do is you're going to try to kind of group these sources into little subcategories as efficiently as possible, so that you're not trying to relate two vastly different sources together, but rather you're trying to relate to related sources in your literature review. So let's take a look just to kind of see what I'm talking about here. And so we can see here that the topic is or the research question this person began with is, what are the view of female jazz musicians and the impact of this view? And so what they mean, kind of what this author means by what are the view, is like, how have female jazz musicians been viewed throughout history and things like that, and what has their impact been on the field. And so we're looking at things like discrimination and kind of topics related to that. Okay, so that's our main topic. And so for you, your topic will be whatever it is, whatever your research question was that began your research. So, why aren't there more men in nursing is one that I saw successfully researched last semester, which is why I keep coming back to it. And so whatever your topic is. So then what we're going to see here is at the very beginning, we have kind of a key section, because this is a brief definition of whatever field it is that you're working with, similar to the kind of definitions that you've been working with in Project 1 and Project 2. We are kind of outlining the boundaries of the field. So here you can come back in and just kind of reiterate, this is what this field is. And then start to focus in on your specific topic. And so you can see here we've got a brief definition, and then we're starting to set up the topic of this literature review. We're looking at things like gender. And so whatever it is, you're kind of introducing the main idea of the paper, just like you introduce the main idea of a paper, in a normal kind of research essay. And then what we have here after that brief introduction is we have this kind of statement of kind of the personal stake in this issue. So what is this author's interest? Why are they interested in it? In this case, this is a jazz musician writing about this, and this is why they're interested in the topic. And so whatever your personal interest is, like what is it that drives your interest in this field, in this topic? And then kind of a brief statement of the problem. So what is the problem that you're researching, whether it's safety in medicine, or gender in nursing, or efficiency in business, whatever the kind of main issue that you're looking at. We'll kind of return to that here with then a brief rundown of how you're organizing the paper. Okay, so first I'm going to do this, second I'm going to do this, third I'm going to do this. So just to recap, brief definition of the field, your kind of personal stake, identification of the main topic or problem that you'll be looking at, and then a brief rundown of how you're going to be tackling this in the literature review. Okay, so once we get to the actual meat and bones of the paper, you'll see that what this author has done is they've grouped their research together based on subtopics. Okay, now all of these authors, all of the research that this person has found, it all relates to that topic of female jazz musicians, right? However, they're all doing it in significantly different ways, as we'll see. So in this first instance, what this author's found, and this is something they would have been able to demonstrate with their research map, that kind of visual map, is that a select number of the authors or of the sources that they found were related to the history of jazz and of women in jazz. Okay, so that when they were doing their research, they found a lot of it was related to history, whereas some other sources didn't care about history. And so what they've done is they've made a whole subcategory devoted to history. And so we can see here that this person then begins the process of summary and synthesis. And so let's take a look here. So in researching jazz history and its traditions, the beginning of female discrimination within this genre of music began in early developmental stages, etc., etc. So a brief introduction of the topic, and then boom, we're right into our first source. So Linda Dahl, which is our first source, states that in order to succeed as a jazz musician, one must have masculine qualities. And then we have a quote that's backing up what Linda Dahl says. So you can see from here on, we are presented our first source, and we are also presented with the main argument of that source. Okay, so there's not really anything straying in here. There's no kind of personal interjections in here. There's no taking sides in here, right? You're not offering up your own argument at this point. All you're doing is saying, this is a subtopic that I found. Here's one source dealing with that topic. Here's what this source says. Okay, so that's the summary part. And then what we can see here, if we move on, is we begin to do the synthesis, where we're bringing in another source that's also talking about history, and we're going to start to construct some sort of relationship between these sources. So let's see. Researchers of jazz history tend to agree upon the masculinity of jazz being established through traditional performance settings and the approach to this music. Ingrid Monson, author 2, describes the jazz community as a fraternity, etc., etc. Okay, and so again, we've got our brief introduction, we've got our introduction of the second source, and the main argument. Jazz is a fraternity. Okay, so just like with this first one, we have the introduction of the source, we have the brief summary of the main argument. But now here's where the real work of the literature review comes in. Now that we have two sources, it's up to the author to show how these sources relate. And so we can see right here. Dahl supports this idea by also realizing the suggestive sense of fraternity among its male members. This fraternity is built upon the commonalities that exist among men and their shared experiences and struggles with the outside world. And so this is really important because what this author has just done, they've taken two separate sources and they've given us the arguments from each one, and then they've explained to us how these sources relate. Dahl supports the idea that Monson brings up, right? So we understand, like, okay, these authors are agreeing with each other around this topic. But then they go one step further. They extend it by showing you exactly how these authors relate. It's not enough just to say, oh, Dahl agrees, but how does Dahl agree? She supports this by realizing the suggestive sense of fraternity and that it's built on commonalities. And so this is what you'll do in yours as well. You might say author 1 says this, author 2 says this. Author 1 agrees with author 2 by, suggesting something similar when he or she says X, Y, and Z. And so that's your goal for the literature review, to introduce various sources and then to show how they relate to each other. Now, they might agree, they might disagree, they might present, different but, not mutually exclusive ideas, whatever it is, whatever that relationship is that you see. And as you go through this, you'll see that the author continues to do this, right? So we've got our next source, where we're talking about, the history of this issue, okay? And that's what they've done. They've brought in several sources all dealing with this history. Dunkel is another source that we see, and then we bring in Selander. And all of this is to show how, various authors are approaching the history of this issue. Now, here's where it gets interesting, because then you can see that once we've finished up with that history section, we transition directly into a different section. Factors contributing to the lack of female participation in jazz. So we've got factors here. We're dealing with the cause of this issue. And you can see, just like the author did for this first section, we're starting to work through an introduction of the topic and an introduction of sources, right? And then we start to move into related sources that are presenting similar or different information, depending on what you have. So the idea here is that when this author was working, he or she noticed that some authors were talking about history, some authors were talking about cause. We can come down here and take a look at the other section. Some authors were talking about, this idea of psychology in relationship to this topic. And instead of trying to relate somebody talking about history to somebody talking about psychology, what they've done is they've grouped these authors together in a way that makes sense, right? Like, it makes sense to tackle all of the history stuff at once. It makes sense to tackle all of the cause stuff at once. It makes sense to talk about all the psychology stuff in one section. And that's okay. You might have something like that. You might have a history of an issue, or a group of authors that are all trying to solve the problem, whereas another group of authors are trying to figure out what is the main cause of this problem, right? And if you group them together like that, it'll allow you to really see how different authors come at this topic. Because all of these authors, even though we're dealing with psychology and causes and history, they're all coming back to that main idea of women in jazz. Just like all of your authors are coming back to that initial topic that you began with your research. So that's your goal for the literature review. It's to summarize these sources, by presenting their main argument, and to show how authors are in conversation with each other, essentially. Like, what is the conversation? How are they related to each other? They agree, they disagree, they say similar things, they say different things, or they say conflicting things, whatever it is. Your job is to tease out those relationships, and you do that by reading through your sources and by really getting to know what your articles are saying. Okay, so if you do have any questions, any lingering questions about the literature review, obviously email me. Please feel free. I haven't had any real Skype conversation requests yet or anything like that, and that's what I'm here for. I've got nothing but time for you guys. So other kind of things that I want to cover, I'm working through your Project 2s. You'll have those back soon, as well as the blog stuff that I owe you as well. So you'll have that all back directly. Also, I wanted to point out that your peer groups now contain a Dropbox or a place to upload your 3B. And so again, this is the first week that you can begin to do that. So keep an eye on that, and let me know if you have any questions. All right, guys. Bye.